Welcome back to the Convo Couch, ladies and gentlemen. I am Pasta Jardula.
I'm Fiorella.
And Jonny Tsunami is on the ones and twos. And today we have with us a great guest. He's also on the ones and twos. He's a big Washington Nationals fan. We thank him for taking time out to doing the show with us. He is the creator of The Real Progressives. What's that? Steve, can you turn down your speaker just a little bit? So sorry. Once again, a big Nationals fan taking time out from the game. We have the creator of Real Progressives with us to teach us some MMT, Steve Grumbine.
Hey, how are you all? Thank you very much for having me on.
Well, it's a pleasure, my friend.
Thank you for coming on here. We really wanted to listen to our viewers and go over MMT because a lot of people are throwing this name out there and a lot of people don't really understand it. And so we kind of just wanted to go over the basics of it and either have you back or have other people talk about it too. So thank you for being here again.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our people, they just all over our chats, they learn MMT, learn MMT. So we put it out there. Michael Cruz, I know he's there. He's excited. Cheyenne Tierra, all these people. And I said, well, who do you want out there? And they gave us a list of a couple people. And I saw your name and I remembered you back in the day going in your car and doing the Real Progressives and talking about deficits and just blowing my mind away. So let's get the ball rolling here with the MMT, Professor Steve. Can you tell us what MMT is and break it down in a macro, basic way?
Yeah, well, let's do keep it real basic because it is pretty simple, actually. So MMT stands for modern monetary or modern money theory, depending upon who you listen to. And basically what it is a description, a lens by which we can understand the macroeconomy as it is today, not some future state, not something we would implement, just the way it is today. And it debunks, by understanding it, it debunks almost all the neoliberal lies that we've heard from the Hillary Clinton camp of the world and the Republicans. Just about everything that you've heard, once you understand how it works, it's almost impossible to listen to the news anymore without gagging because you realize how much we've been gaslit, how much we've been lied to. And then you start feeling really bad for our movement because our movement's desperate for change or desperate to see real positive change. And we've been led to believe that the nation is broke, that, we can't do anything good for our kids. We can't save ourselves from environmental collapse. And MMT really allows us to understand that, number one, the difference between what we call a currency issuer and a currency user. It helps us understand what monetary sovereignty means, meaning a country or a government issues its own currency, and that it can issue as much of it as it wants to, and that it is a unit of measure, basically an inch, a pound, whatever. It has no intrinsic value. The value comes by the debt that's associated with it in the form of a tax. So by taxing it, it means you and I need it. So anyway, the reality of modern monetary theory is as simple as understanding the state government, which in our case is the federal government, is the sovereign. It is the one that can create and spend money into existence. And by having that power to do that, it can never go broke. It can always afford anything available for sale in its own currency. And, the money story goes something like this. Back in the day when kings ruled the world and a king wanted to build an aqueduct, or the king wanted a standing army, or the king wanted to build roads and highways or whatever, the king would say, hey, peasants, you're my slaves. Or, hey, peasants, come out here and build me my road or build me my castle or build me my aqueduct. And the guy would look at him and say, no, I'm good. I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm fine. The king says, well, how about I give you a gold coin? And the peasant goes, what am I going to do with this stupid gold coin? I'm fine. I'm going to go out fishing. I'm going to till the potatoes. I'm going to do whatever it is that we do out here on the farm. The king goes, good point. He goes, how about this? I'll let you keep your house if you pay me 10 of these gold coins. And the guy goes, oh, how do I get those gold coins? He goes, nice of you to ask. I have this aqueduct I'd like you to build. I'd like this standing army. I'd like that, I'd like these roads built. So what do you give me? I'll give you 20 of these gold coins. You just give me 10 of them back and you can keep your house and so on and so forth. And so the money story created the first unemployed person, basically, because the government wanted to provision itself. So that's in essence MMT, as you start realizing that our government spends money into existence every single time it writes a bill. Every single time a Social Security check goes out, that's new money. Every time, we spend money on a bomb, that's new money. Every time we pay a teacher's salary at the federal, anything, it's always new money. So what happens if we just keep, quote unquote, printing more money, which isn't the way it works, but let's just say hypothetically for the lay people out there, we just print all this money. Well, money would just keep going everywhere, and it would have absolutely no value after a period of time, because it would just be literally, there'd be no value to it whatsoever. The government has to be able to tax to be able to cause that money to have any value. So the tax actually draws that money out of the economy. It actually deletes it's like a circuit, if you will. Mm-hmm. So as the government spends it into existence, it taxes it out of existence. And that's why you hear a lot of people saying taxes don't fund spending and so forth. So modern monetary theory is a way we can judge progressive policies and progressive ideas through the lens of understanding how the economy really works. And there's much more to it than that, but at a high level, that's it in a nutshell.
You want to go first?
No, you can go first.
Well, let's start talking right off the bat, because I think I grasp the basic concept, and I always tell somebody, like, hey, you got $20. What is it really worth? This is a piece of paper. It's $20 because somebody tells you it's worth $20, pretty much. There's nothing backing it, like the gold, whatnot, since we got off the gold standard. So what you're saying, that everything new that we get is new money appropriated?
Every time.
Every single thing. Then what do they do with our taxes that come back in? Is that not reappropriated out there, our federal income taxes?
They're shredded. They're shredded. Literally, every dollar is a new dollar spent. So this circuit is perpetual, and it's going back to colonial times. They used to burn the money, to be honest with you. It's always just been a tax credit, okay? So you can look clearly and see, out of nowhere, out of thin air, the United States just gave $750 billion to the military-industrial complex while simultaneously cutting taxes. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to put this together. But they've conditioned us all to believe that we're broke, that we can't do nice things, that if we don't raise taxes, we can't afford to take care of our children. So, all those poor people out there, they're poor because people are greedy, not because the government has chosen to do it the way it does it, but that somehow or another we're just inept and we can't possibly save people from this terrible, scourge of greed and stuff by the rich people. We need the rich people's tax dollars in order to take care of the poor. And reality is we could render the rich irrelevant, work right around them, and make shit happen for everybody, and really make this a fair and just and caring economy.
So in essence, you're saying that raising taxes on the rich isn't really the solution. Well, then how do you look at what something like Bernie Sanders is proposing, like a wealth tax on the...
Well, taxes serve very, very important role. Let me be very clear here. Taxes just don't pay for programs. That's the only difference here. So we're looking at changing equality. We're about increasing democracy. We're about, if somebody has, for example, the thing that really backs our dollar, so to speak, is the full faith and credit of the United States, which is bound by the full resources of the United States, and we have abundant resources. However, when Bernie Sanders talks about a wealth tax, or when he talks about raising taxes on the wealthy, what he's really trying to do is he's trying to bring about a more equal society. Because if you can all of a sudden buy up all the water on the planet, hypothetically, or you could buy up all the gasoline on the planet, or you could, you have an outsized ability to impact democracy based on these pieces of paper that the government itself is the sole creator of. So when you allow that to happen, what you've done is you've really, really tipped the balance and created a plutocracy in effect. And that's exactly what Bernie is fighting against, is an oligarchy, a plutocracy that in essence is brought about by an unequal distribution of our nation's wealth.
So you're saying the the taxing of the wealthy is not so much to get money to pay for things, but it's to keep the fair balance of spreading out money and resources to everybody? Is that
That's
more
correct.
the mental capacity when it comes to taxing the wealthy?
That's absolutely correct. I mean, taxes are necessary. Taxes drive our currency. In order to have a need for that currency, you have to be able to tax in that currency. That's what happened to the Confederacy. They were unable to keep a tax going. And so they went into a hyperinflation during the Civil War of all times. What a grand time to go bankrupt, right? So in the United States, as long as we are able to tax in our currency, you can't pay your taxes in chicken necks. You can't pay your taxes in favors. You can't pay your taxes in diamonds, and you can't pay your taxes in barrels of oil. You can only pay your taxes in US dollars. And that is a very, very important understanding, because that is what gives that specific unit of measure its value, is the government's ability to tax in that specific thing.
So if printing more money isn't the solution, then essentially what is? Because I've seen a lot of people who believe in MMT say, well, like, you can just print more money, and it's the value that you put into the what the money is, like the value that we need, that society puts into it.
So first things first, the dollar is equal to $1 in tax credit. So the dollar, we have to think about the dollar as a tax credit, period. That's all it is. So when we talk about back in the gold standard, right, you have a pool of gold. Let's say the pie, like a pizza pie, you slice it in 8 slices, and $1 is associated with each slice of the pizza. Okay, if you wanted to print more money on the gold standard, you have to slice the pizza pie up into more slices, and that's when you devalue the dollar and all the other stuff you hear so frequently. But that's not what we're on anymore. There is no pie of gold. There's simply spending and taxing. And so in the cases of the federal government, which is the currency issuer, and we can talk about the states in a minute, we're never just printing money. We never print money against, we only spend money into existence. The government neither has dollars nor doesn't have dollars. It's the creator of those dollars. It's the scorekeeper. It hands out those dollars based on the bills it passes. So, like, when you hear us talk about automatic stabilizers, those are laws that have been passed that when certain economic conditions happen and trigger in the economy, that money is automatically created and spent on those things, entitlements, things like that. You know that the Social Security check's going to come. For example, when you have a downturn economy and you have people going on to welfare, all of a sudden those natural automatic stabilizers start kicking in. They don't write a bill for each one of those dollars spent. What they do is these are already pre-existing programs, and those dollars are created out of thin air and spent into existence. They're also taxed back out of existence. So again, there's very few pieces of paper dollars in the world. Very, very few paper dollar compared to the actual digital dollars that we have by keystrokes that are entered into bank accounts. Mm-hmm. They say, they're entering these things directly in. Like, where does the score from a baseball game come from? You know, they don't bring points to the game and say, oh, we only have so many points. Oh, we're out of points. Points that just come. These are like a scorekeeper. And I think that's really important to think of dollars differently than you do today. In other words, it's going to require a slight change in the way you view this to be able to totally get what I'm saying. And it happens that way for everybody. So, it's not a one-off thing. I mean, I can't think of a single person that I've ever spoken to that didn't start out from a position of gold standard-minded thinking, because that's what they teach in college. That's what they taught in grad school. I got an MBA, for goodness sakes, and I learned all this stuff. I had to unlearn so much. I was going for my PhD, and I had to unlearn stuff. I got a Master of Science. I had to unlearn stuff. And you unlearn it empirically because you can see clearly the transactions, the way they go on the ledger, and you know clearly how this stuff works. I mean, in the end, it really is freeing to be able to divorce yourself from the old school logic that you hear on the television. Think about every time Hillary Clinton would cackle and talk about it being pie in the sky. Yeah. Think about every time she diminished our dreams, every time she tried to take a dump on everything that was progressive. And we had to just sort of sit there and take it because our movement had no idea how to answer the almighty question of how are you going to pay for it? So now we're saying, hey, we've got this answer. Not only can we see how to pay for it, we can see how to pay for a Green New Deal. We can see how to pay for Medicare for all. We can see how to pay for all this stuff. I mean, and all you got to do is look at the military for your blueprint. I mean, it's in the end, it's pretty simple. It really is, actually.
So Bernie Sanders becomes president, and he says Medicare for all 1 year, $1 billion. He directs the Fed to print the $1 billion so we can pay electronically for the health care. And then we tax the wealthy as a balancing mechanism to keep our dollar of value. Does that make sense?
Interestingly enough, that's pretty daggone close. So what would happen is that as expenditures go out for Medicare for all, the money goes into the Treasury's account, and the Treasury disperses payments. However, the thing that you said that was really important there is that we need to be able to rein in relative buying power. There's a certain offset. There's a certain amount of space, if you will, slack in the economy based on full employment. So you see, for the years that the Fed and others have always targeted this thing called NARU, okay, which is like the metric for how many people we want involuntarily unemployed to be able to keep things under control, to keep inflation at bay. Non-existent inflation, by the way. And so, yes, they would tax the wealthy, not to pay for the program in any way, shape, or form, but simply to be able to bring about more equality and also take the heat off of possibly an overheating economy. Just give you an example. Let's say Bernie Sanders, to your point, passes a Green New Deal with a job guarantee and all this stuff. I mean, huge amounts of spending, right? I mean, massive amounts of spending. So what do we do with all that? Well, you're going to have every man, woman, and child, well, legal age, mind you, with a job if they want. There's absolutely no reason they can't hire every single person. So you'll have unemployment down to zero by doing this. The just transition for all those industries that will be wiped out with the Green New Deal, they'll have jobs waiting there through the federal job guarantee program. So all of a sudden now you're at max capacity. And all you got to do is look back at World War II. World War II was a really important period of time if you want to get a snapshot of what I'm talking about. The factories were all running at 110% capacity. People were all full employed. The men were over there fighting a war, and the women and children were in the factories.
Yeah.
There was no slack labor whatsoever. So the economy was roaring. It was roaring so much, and there wasn't an ability to create the real goods and services that the people needed, that they had to start selling war bonds, not to pay for the war, but to take money out of the economy, to take the heat off of an overheating, maxed out economy. So these debt tools, these debt instruments are not meant to fund anything. The United States doesn't require bond sales to fund itself. They use that to target a target interest rate for bank lending. And so by setting the target interest rate at a certain thing, they sell bonds and stuff like that to offset, to stabilize the interest rates that they're targeting. I don't know if that helped at all or if it confused things, but that's the story.
No, I mean, I'm starting. I want to read the super.
Yeah. We're just gonna read a.
Okay. Johnny's gonna give it. Just listen up, Johnny, who has a quick summary. Go ahead, Johnny.
Hey, Steve. This is Jonny Tsunami. I'm on the ones and twos, live streaming the whole, engineering the whole show. You can hear me, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. So basically, MMT is basically, first of all, the first thing we have to get through our head is the lie that was told to us that the U.S. dollar is backed by gold. And in fact, it's a fiat currency, which means?
By decree. So you have a sovereign, meaning by the government, free floating, meaning that it's not pegged to gold, fiat, meaning by decree, meaning spoken into existence.
Right.
So there you go. The sovereign, free-floating, non-convertible, meaning you can't force convert to gold, fiat currency.
Okay, got that down. And then taxes are important for to keep inflation from happening, correct? And
Inflation.
Also to kind of direct where we want our resources to go to.
That is correct. It is the ability to level the playing field. It is the ability to, shall we say, compensate productive work versus non-productive rent seeking and things like that. There are political choices that you can make with this. I don't want to go too far off your question. I just want to make a point that there's a lot of these things you see the Republicans do very bass-awkwardly. But what they do is they're leveraging MMT, knowledge of MMT, all the time when they reduce taxes, et cetera. So sometimes you see Republicans accidentally get something right, but for all the wrong reasons. Now, you got Democrats and Greens and others that want all these great programs, but they get the spending all wrong. So both sides of this thing, you got no friends there. They all have to be educated. So
Right.
Yeah.
And then I guess the last thing is when it comes to the budget, and when they say, being over budget or under budget, what does that really mean?
Yeah, so you got to realize that these folks go through a budgeting process just like everybody else does. I mean, just like every business does, et cetera. The difference is, and this is a huge difference, your business, our households, your state that you live in, all of us are restricted by the amount of revenue that we bring in. If a state wants to spend beyond its taxes, it's got to buy bonds. It's got to do something, take on debt. But these states are not sovereign currency issuers. Only the federal government can do that. So the difference is so dramatic because the federal government has special powers. And you can clearly see that's how we won World War II, so to speak. And some would complain that we didn't win, Russians won, whatever. Point being is that we couldn't have done half of what we did. We couldn't have had a space program. We couldn't have built these things if we did not understand, that we could in fact do this stuff. We're the ones that have been left behind on this.
Well, being a foreign policy junkie, I will tell you that it doesn't matter who won it. I think Russia just sacrificed a lot more lives, and that's what people are trying to get at. But Steve, let's get to the next question, because this is really awesome, because Richard Greenwood left a super chat contribution, and he says, Steve, citizens need to learn or be reminded what the Constitution says about making money. We have the power, just need to exercise it. And that is a good, interesting point, because I thought the Fed wasn't owned by the government. In other words, does the Fed have to listen to Congress when Congress says make this money?
Yes. So here's the thing. First of all, as Warren Mosler, who's the father of modern monetary theory, would say, government checks don't bounce. So when the government instructs the Fed, which is the nation's bank, which was spoken into existence in 1913 through Congress, act of Congress, and the charter for the Fed has been completely redone a million times over again. Article 1, Section 8 clearly states that Congress has the power of the purse. And so if you think about that, that's a really, really big deal, right? That's a huge deal. So when Congress authorizes spending, spending is done. Now, you could, it's funny because I hear a lot of people talk about, and the Fed do all these things, and whatever, man. If you think we got enough political capital to save ourselves from extinction, from climate change, to get health care and all this other stuff, to eradicate student debt, and oh, by the way, impeach a president and run over here and do all these scatterbrain, shotgun scatter ideas, instead of just let's go for the gold, literally, and start saving some lives. So Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress the power of the purse. The Federal Reserve Act of 1913 was passed by Congress. It has been altered by Congress a bazillion times. The Fed has had varying levels of independence because really all it's doing is setting interbank lending rates. It's not really doing anything in terms of, it doesn't really have an impact on Congress's ability to spend. Congress could instruct the Treasury to do whatever. The arrangement's there. If you look, the Treasury and the Fed have a consolidated balance sheet. When dollars go over here, it goes over there. It literally is the ins and the outs on the same exact balance sheet. So if you ended the Fed and brought that into the Treasury, you would have no real difference other than possibly having it more politicized in the government sector, where you would have politicians now making choices, which is fine with me too. I don't really have a care either way that goes. I think Congress should exert a hell of a lot more pressure on the Fed to make it bend to its wishes as opposed to the other way around. But that's, I think, more theatrics than it is anything, because these guys are all in bed together with this neoliberal slant of pushing us to bank lending. Anyway, go ahead.
I just had a question as far as the way this would is this something that's working in other nations, like in the Netherlands or in other nations? Because when you look at a place like Denmark, you see the high taxes there. And
Sure.
Republicans always look to that to say, oh, yeah, they have all these services, but look at how high of their tax rate is.
Right. So first things first, Japan is got a 300% debt to GDP ratio right now. Japan is a living, breathing experiment example. And it really doesn't matter. The U.S. is happening right now, too, by the way. The only difference is that we don't use it for the people. We use it for our military.
Right.
Exactly.
It's happening in Australia. It's happening in the UK. The Eurozone, this is interesting, because you hear people say, you don't want us to turn into Greece, do you?
Right.
Well, Greece doesn't have a sovereign currency anymore. It gave up the drachma and is now on the euro. So the euro isn't run by a state, it's run by a federation. And by running it by a federation, what they've done is they've eliminated the state's abilities to offset leakages and issues within. So I'm going to take you on a short journey on this, because this is a very important point. I mean, probably the most important point. You'll see it play out in the States and the United States as well. So you notice that Germany is king of the euro. Germany is also a net exporter. So when you hear people in the U.S. talking about bringing the jobs back and we got to have all this stuff, you look at Germany and you say, wow, okay, so bring all the jobs back, we can be like Germany. Well, the difference here is Germany doesn't have the power to create its own sovereign currency either anymore. It's given up that right to the euro. So Germany is basically the state of Texas now. If you think about it, you look at Greece. Greece isn't the United States. It's not even comparable. It's like the state of Maine or Delaware or Michigan or the state of Pennsylvania even. So states are screwed here, right? Unless they are net exporters. And you look at how Texas went and lured all these businesses down there, slashing taxes and giving sweetheart deals. And you look what Brownback did in Kansas, ripping taxes down, just decimating the social safety nets, decimating the school system to lure businesses in there. This is the race to the bottom that is a direct result of not understanding how this stuff works. Over there in Europe, you can see Greece is a net importer 1,000,000 times over again. So the big export they have, the big industry is tourism, but they don't have enough coming in to offset the expenditures. So what happens is states and countries that are not sovereign have to rely on exports to be able to survive. The United States, on the other hand, and Australia, Canada, the UK, even Russia, Japan, all these countries that I labeled off there, each one of them sees people that are sending their import or exports to us, to their countries. That's a net value, whereas we're handing them pieces of paper or digits for their real goods and real services. So it's a different environment, because our nation has been a net importing nation to the tune of $500 billion a year for a long time.
Yeah.
So it's an important thing to understand that a country that is a net importer, if they are not monetarily sovereign, they're going to be in deep trouble, like Greece.
Yeah.
But we're not like Greece.
So I got a couple super chats and I got a couple questions.
There was like a bunch.
Yeah, there's a
okay.
lot.
So let me go back up there. I missed a bunch. I'm so sorry. Amirs has been hanging in. Thank you so much. Thank you. We need this spread far and wide. I agree. That's why I wanted to get you on the show. Big Baby Zuba says, "What up, Steve? I missed your Facebook post. Shadow banned."
Yes.
You know what that's like, Steve.
Horrible.
Rob R says, "Ask Steve why UBI is neoliberal and not progressive."
That's a good question.
Go ahead, Steve.
Okay, so we go back to the idea that the United States government creates currency at will.
Yeah.
And every time it spends currency, it spends it by edict of Congress. Well, when you look at the services that we need, housing, food, medical, all these things, we have one of two ways to get those. We can either A, the government can provide these services to us, or B, we can go out there like the ACA and have to buy them ourselves. So what a UBI by its very nature does is it says, hey, here's your UBI. Now go buy these services for yourself. Now, the thing is that with a UBI, there's no price anchor. There's nothing to anchor that money whatsoever. So if everybody gets $1,000, now there's no price anchor. So hypothetically, let's use a school voucher system as a UBI in this case. You're in a local community, there's 3 or 4 different schools. All the poor kids keep going to this one school, and they say, oh, let's give vouchers so everybody has a chance at a good education. Well, now all of a sudden the rich add another $1,000 onto their voucher, and they go to a better school, and they once again cloister together, and the rich people have the richer and the poor have the poorer, and nothing's changed. It's called status quo. But the cost has risen now. The cost has risen propensity to the cost of the voucher. You look at a UBI, and instead of providing a job guarantee with a floor, a wage floor, let's say of $20 an hour, now all of a sudden what you've done is you've given people $1,000. And then you get to hear Obama say, now go shut up and eat your peas. And in my mind, and not just my mind, but from a macroeconomic perspective, the UBI is only giving you some cash to fatten the capitalist class. Now you're giving money back to the capitalists. Here's money. We would liken it to saying, as an MMTer, now mind you, MMT is not political in any way, shape, or form. It's just a lens. So I want to be real clear. But from a judgment of what neoliberalism is, neoliberalism, going back to Milton Friedman, he said the only thing wrong with capitalism is we need more capitalism. So the idea was to drop helicopter money into communities to give them more money to spend, and that would bring up sales, right? Well, the problem is that without the price anchor, that just raises prices, and then all of a sudden now you've got this cost push, inflation, and then you got a real problem on your hands. And what's the worst part of this? Hey, poor person, you got your $1,000. Shut up. Why? You must be irresponsible. Why didn't you take care of getting your health care with your $1,000? Why didn't you take care of all these things? And so the GOP and the libertarians have long since been begging for a UBI forever. They want to get rid of the social safety nets. They want to make government seem absolutely impotent to solve the needs of the people. And by its very definition, by seeking private solutions, they have, in essence, pushed the most neoliberal idea there is. And so let's take a Walmart, for example. Walmart pays shit wages. So what do? Half their employees are on welfare. They sit there and push these people out there to state solutions because they're paying a crap wage. A UBI is typically, unless it's a living wage, okay, but still need a price anchor here. But unless it's a living wage, you're just subsidizing shit wages for these greedy companies that their CEOs are making hundreds of thousands, if not millions more than the people that work for them, while you're subsidizing their crap wages. And that's not acceptable as a progressive. That's definitely not a progressive solution. So the progressive solution, which is what Bernie's pushing, which is Stephanie Kelton, which is what the MMT community stands for, is the federal job guarantee. Because what you've done masterfully, you've neutered capital. What you've done is you said, we're going to give a living wage. We're going to pay it at the federal level so the states aren't on the hook for it. But we're going to let the local communities decide what they want to compensate. So in other words, if your local community values motherhood, or if your local community values taking care of an elderly relative, or if your local community values teaching kids how to paint in a park, whatever it is your local community decides, your local community can fund. So the idea here is that locally administered, federally funded, and you've made it so you're not subsidizing shit wages. You're providing a living wage. And now what does the private sector have to do if they want to hire you out of the public option for employment? They have to raise their rates. They have to give you better benefits. They have to do something to get you out of the job guarantee. And that's going to be tough. But now all of a sudden, back to Fiorella's original point about printing money, what we've done is we've done a net infusion of money into the economy by giving people a federal job. And by doing that, they also have the benefits. And these people have to buy bread. They have to buy electric. They have to buy gas. They have to buy all the things that normal people do. And now all of a sudden they got the money to do it. So each business go right through the roof. Now all of a sudden we have really created an economy that doesn't leave people behind. generational poverty. And let me tell you something else. This was probably the biggest eye opener. When you look at women who have been abused forever, they've been living in crappy situations, domestic violence, and they can't go anywhere. They stay at home, they raise their kids, and they have no skills. They've been left behind. Those women stay in horrible situations because they have nowhere to go. They have no choices. The federal job guarantee guarantees a job to everyone. So that woman can pick up in Flint, Michigan, where her water is still not fixed, and she can go down to Denver, Colorado, where she can smoke weed, get clean water, and have a job instantly. And this is what a federal job guarantee does. So the difference is we're providing services, we're providing real resources, we're providing benefits versus here's some cash. Now you better make some good choices. And if not, oh, well, you got your UBI, go deal with it. And that, my friends, is the difference between progressive and neoliberal.
So, just kind of like to a little, push back, because we have a lot of people who like Andrew Yang and who support his UBI, mainly specifically based on the automation, the issue that, automation is taking over many industries and it's something we're not going to be able to stop. And I do agree that actually I've read that it's definitely a neoliberal economic point of view. However, based on what Andrew Yang says, I guess in reference to what you say, it's whatever they value. Like if I'm a single mother, or if I'm trying to stay home with my kids, then that can also be a value. Andrew Yang's solution is, well, the mother that isn't working, at least she's going to get $1,000. So in reference to automation and how people are being displaced in certain, in grocery stores and fast food shops, how do we solve and deal with the automation through a federal jobs guarantee when those jobs aren't necessarily, they're going to be replaced by robots instead of people?
So first things first, going back to the Industrial Revolution, we have always had automation taking away jobs. This is not new. We have always done. Always. The abacus still hates the calculator. This stuff that has never, ever not happened. So we're going to always have work. Captain Kirk works. Darth Vader showed up for work every day. We've always had jobs. There's always going to be work to do. And the point is that when you look at what we consider jobs, what we're typically looking at, and this is what we've really got to change as progressives, what we're typically looking at is we're typically looking at people thinking that in order to qualify for a job, you have to work for the man and it has to be profitable. And the difference here is we're talking about work. In my own home community, my kids don't get to go to gym class every day. They go to gym class like once every 10 days because they can't afford to have gym class every day. They don't have home ec. They don't have driver's ed. They don't have any of these things anymore. Why is that? Because they can't afford it. Now, hypothetically, what do you think it would take if we gave teachers a living wage, a real paycheck, an actual paycheck commensurate with raising our children, and then on top of it made these things actually available every day like they used to be back in the good old days, and we start funding real community involvement and community investment? Now, I can tell you right now, there is more work not being done than is being done right now. And there's no evidence that there's not going to be millions and millions and millions of jobs for forever. In fact, the transition to green energy alone, as we shift into a green economy, as we shift away from this fossil fuels, there's going to be a whole new eruption of new industry, new ways of doing things, entirely new jobs that you've never even thought of. And so that's just on the professional side. That's on the for-profit side. But remember, the job guarantee allows people that want to be artists. Imagine me and you living in the same, all of us in the same community. We go down to the town hall, we're voting for what jobs we want to compensate within our local community. Now, all of a sudden, the things that aren't being done are being done. All of a sudden, we've reinvigorated democracy at the local level. People are going to suddenly care what's going on in the elections because they want to be involved in picking out how it affects their lives. It'll have a real cause and effect. So I think that automation displaces many jobs that I say, bring it on. Let's get rid of them.
Yeah.
We're not asking, you don't want to twist the ties on a Tootsie Pop, man. Let some machine do it. That's fine. You know, you don't need to say fries with that. Come on, let the computer do that. We
Right.
can do
Agreed.
other things. We can do more important things.
Yeah.
And we are facing a climate catastrophe, I think, beyond words. And we don't have any idea what the economy is going to look like as climate change strikes and strikes hard. The rebuilding efforts in coastal communities. I mean, I can't even begin to tell you. It's such a farce. It's such a typical Silicon Valley elite plutocratic way of trying to say, we're going to be the new rulers of tomorrow. You little people are going to be all displaced. Let's give you a UBI so you don't kill us. That's really what this is. It's pennies for peasants, and it's bullshit. Excuse my French.
Love
No,
it.
you're fine.
Love it.
Let's read a couple of these.
There are 30 kids per teacher in each classroom here in California. If we had 10 kids,
It was 40.
it was 40.
It was over 40.
So if you had 10 kids, now you just quadrupled the amount of teachers we need
Yeah.
in California. So I'm all for it. Amar says Red Bull for fee. I don't know. We don't need no Red Bull. And Charles
like
Barrett
Red Bull.
just joined on in. Thank you, Charles Barrett, for the super chat contribution. And those are our super chats. So let's talk about debts for a second real quick, because I was reading some of the memes you sent on over to do some homework for Professor Steve. And I saw that with the one time we paid the whole debt back was the year we went into the Great Depression. Did we need to do that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
No, let's do talk about that. I'm glad we're going to I want to talk a little bit about the things, in particular national debt and what deficits are and some of that. So let's bundle that together for a minute, right? So the national debt is the sum total of every untaxed dollar in existence today. And so that is really difficult to grasp sometimes. But what happens is China will sell us a bunch of goods and services into the United States. What does China get in return for all its sales in the United States?
Bonds.
They get U.S. dollars. They don't get bonds. They get dollars.
Okay.
They get to choose, do I want to keep these dollars here in the States to facilitate trade? Do I want to earn a nominal interest and keep them here in U.S. dollars? Do I have a desire to save in U.S. dollars? And if they do, they may buy bonds so they can earn a nominal interest rate on that money that they earned in trade. We didn't borrow their money. Remember what I said about the war bonds in World War II. The bonds were there to take the heat off the economy. So when the Fed and the Treasury work together to create these bonds, what they're doing is they're saying, hey, in order to hit this target interest rate, we got to take some heat off the economy. So let's go ahead and sell some more bonds. Or maybe they want to go ahead. At the end of the day, it's just a brake and a gas pedal. Right? So what happens when you pay off the debt is you're literally getting rid of the dollars in the economy. Okay? Because what ends up happening is those dollars, they don't go anywhere. I mean, they're just sitting there literally in the Fed. You're literally deleting money from the economy. And so at the end of the day, if you think about this, the debt, because what is a dollar? Remember what a dollar is. A dollar is a tax credit. That's all it is. Got to get back to the money story. And so if you think about the dollar as a tax credit, if we wipe out and we bring them all back together, dark crystal style, light crystal, dark crystal back together, the dollar comes back as a tax, it's gone. So you've just taken your bathtub full of money and you've drained it out. Yay, team. What a great job we did. Isn't that wonderful? We paid down the debt. Now we got no money in the economy and people are jumping out of buildings and hanging themselves and all the other stuff that goes along with depressions and recessions that are like a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the junk. You know, I mean, this is just really bad business when we start talking about reducing debt and reducing deficits. And there's a great video that Kelton has on her Twitter account. I don't know if she still has it pinned at the top. But it's like every single one of our heroes and our anti-heroes saying, the national debt is immoral. We got to take out a credit card with the People's Republic of China. It's immoral. And, got to reduce it. It's a moral crisis. And they say this stuff over and over and over again. Aren't you like just dying to figure out when the deficit's going to kill us all? Aren't you just dying to figure out when the nation's just going to go up in smoke and die from having dollars in the economy? It's ridiculous. But that's what they've sold us because, and it works. It works. That's the worst part. It works. You and I, we can't spend more than we have in our bank account. Or we get a credit card from the People's Bank of whatever. And now all of a sudden we're paying back interest. and we are dead broke, and now we got to file bankruptcy. So this is the paradigm the average voter thinks of when they think about the federal government. But the federal government has special powers. It creates dollars at will. So this is where the huge difference comes in. And we've got to divorce that thinking of household budget. The government has no means. It can spend whatever it votes into existence. The only real constraint is our brains and, more importantly, inflation. And the way to stave off inflation is the federal job guarantee. Federal job guarantee is a perfect counter-cyclical automatic stabilizer. People roll into the job guarantee, people roll off the job guarantee as the economy booms and busts, and that way we have a floor. Imagine if we had a job guarantee during the great financial crisis. Imagine how many people would not have hung themselves or jumped out of windows, or literally all the families that split up over financial duress. I mean, it's a huge deal. So this national debt fear porn, and that's all it is fear porn, is a big giant nothing burger. It's just the outstanding dollars that have not been taxed back yet. And that's it. From the dawn of time, by the way.
And you were saying Japan is a good example of that, right? Because they have a
Absolutely.
huge debt. Yeah. So
Japan has a 300% debt to GDP ratio. We aren't even in the same stratosphere of that. Just so you know, they don't have. Not only do they not have an empire and standing army and all this other stuff that we have, but they're a tiny island nation with 300% debt to GDP. Think about what I'm saying. Think about how preposterous it is when you hear people in the progressive movement of all the very people we got to count on to pass these big measures, talking about how broke we are and how we got to raise taxes to pay for things. It is very frustrating when you know better. So anyway.
So the IMF, can you explain the IMF to me, the International Monetary Fund? Yeah,
so a bunch of the U.S. is actually the founder of this thing. And basically they have a basket of currencies. These guys throw this money out there and they use it to help fund third world countries and countries that go into financial ruin, that don't have the real resources of their own to get out of the hole. And real resources being possibly productive capacity, not just like minerals and stuff like that, but actually there's a lot of very wealthy, resource-wealthy countries that don't have the productive capacity to capitalize on that. So the IMF will go in there, like your Confessions of an Economic Hitman kind of stuff. They'll go into places. They'll make them sweetheart offers to hey, if you cut all these things, we'll give you these loans, but they impose an austerity on them.
Yeah.
So the IMF is really a goon squad that needs to be done away with, in my opinion, or radically reformed. But it's just another neoliberal thing that they use to capture countries' real resources by they go in there literally and steal. They plunder the living shit out of these third world countries, and it is absolutely the most immoral organization I think I've ever seen in my life.
So the currency they use, is it dollars? Is it the euro? Or
it's a basket. It's a bunch of them. It's not just dollars. It's whatever. Right. So you have to look at all the different countries that are a part of the IMF. And I'm going to be perfectly frank. I don't have total recall on that, so I don't want to start saying information that people could easily fact check on their own. Rather than have them debunk me, just go look it up.
Okay. And then, I just see online a lot, people are like, oh, the Rothschilds, the bank and everything. And then like the only reason the U.S. government even started an anti-regime change war in Syria was because Gaddafi.
Well, that's Libya. Yeah. They started his own currency backed by gold.
So. Yeah.
Right. So
there's so I used to do the Slayer scream where I go Rothschild. I can't do it right now, but I used to hit this real high note just making fun of it because I used to be a Ron Paul guy. Full disclosure, I was a right-wing lunatic years ago, and so all these tales from the fire pit were flowing free, and we all had it. Man, I mean, I wish I had it in front of me. Actually, I think I have it somewhere down here. I'm not going to go crazy looking for it, but I think I still have my Creature from Jekyll Isle book laying around here somewhere. I mean, this is old school fear porn. There's a lot of rich people in the world that want to keep rich and they want to have power and they want to be the ring kissed and all this stuff, and the Rothschilds are probably just one of many.
Right.
So much of this is just literally conspiracy gibberish. Now, mind you, there are really bad people in the world, and a lot of them have a lot of freaking money. And, you see movies like Hostel and you say, damn, that just doesn't seem like a fantasy. That seems like reality. This is what these people do probably. But that doesn't change the fact that the United States government is the sovereign and it controls what it spends, period. The only thing the Fed does at all, is control interest rates.
We have a super chat?
Yes, we do have from Richard Greenwood. And, Stephen, you're going to have to also, we have a young audience, so when you say Dark Crystal style, you're going to have to explain that because they ain't going to know about the Dark Crystal. I think they're bringing it back, but they ain't going to know about the Dark Crystal like me and you. Richard Greenwood says, fiat currency sounds illicit, but Article 1, Section 8 says Congress has the power to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin.
Yeah, so Article 1, Section 8 was written before the computer, so we learn to get over ourselves and we don't get too rote and caught up in silly stuff that I see happen so often. The fact of the matter is that currency, it doesn't matter what form it takes. It really doesn't. And that's super important to understand. I mean, we could sit there and create a cryptocurrency for the United States. We could shift gears and create a crypto of our own making. It would become our unit of account. There's no reason we can't do this. This has always befuddled me why we try to get so. I mean, think about how radically different currency is today in general, period. I mean, sorry, it doesn't hold any water.
So, yeah, just kind of going along those lines then, there's a lot of, things, cryptocurrencies rising up with Bitcoin, and like Pasa was telling you earlier, we have a new platform that just functions on sort of Bitcoin. What is your opinion on that as to, how it would function under MMT, or how it doesn't really matter at all?
And so Bitcoin is just a envelope, if you will. Okay, so it's a wallet, and I can shove US dollars into my wallet. It goes in the form of Bitcoin. I send it to wherever I'm sending it to. They open their wallet up, and out comes US dollars. I mean, you don't say, I'm going to buy 50 Bitcoin worth of wheat. You say, I'm going to buy $50 worth of wheat. And at the same time, you purchase a Bitcoin in US dollars. And then it comes out on the other end, and it's converted to U.S. dollars. Now, there are some exchanges out there where people can buy and sell things using Bitcoin, just like you can go to Chuck E. Cheese and use Chuck E. Cheese coins to get, some toy off the shelf. At the end of the day, though, you cannot pay your taxes in Bitcoin. And this is what I was trying to say is what drives the currency, and what also, by extension, gives the currency not only its value, but really why it is the predominant means of exchange in the United States. And every country you look, they have the same thing. I mean, cryptocurrencies, let me back up for a minute. Facebook is trying to do something with crypto of sorts, trying to create like a PayPal of sorts through this Libra thing. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't know if you all followed this or not, but this is an extreme takeover in many ways. This is a legitimate shot at them trying to create a sovereign currency at a global level. This is one of those things right there where you see the Silicon Valley people once again trying to become kings of the universe. So this is a little bit different than Bitcoin and stuff. Bitcoin, I mean, I may want to have Bitcoin for my own reasons. I might want to have Ethereum. I might want to have, some sort of stable coin. Whatever it is, at the end of the day, it really doesn't impact the MMT side of things, because ultimately I can impose a tax in US dollars, and you can have a bazillion Bitcoins, but you can't pay your taxes on them until you convert them to US dollars to pay tax. And again, remember my story of the king. Person says, hey man, I got 1 million Bitcoins. I don't need to go work for you. The guy's like, you know what? You're right. You don't have to work for me. So I'm going to impose a tax on you payable only in US dollars. Now what are you going to do? Oh, I'm going to sell my Bitcoin and get dollars so I don't lose my home. Right. Exactly. So I don't really have a problem with Bitcoin. I mean, it serves a purpose, but let's not fool ourselves. It's not getting you green energy. It's not getting you a Green New Deal. It's not getting you Medicare for all. It's not getting you student debt cancellation. It's not doing any of those things. It's just a wallet, an electronic wallet that you can put money in. And actually, I mean, it's got a lot of value in terms of using it for voting. The technology under things like Bitcoin, the crypto world really, really, truly has a lot of great uses. And in fact, there are people within the MMT community who are looking at how, because remember, MMT is just a lens. It's not something we have to implement. So if we change to something else, MMT will describe that as well. Yeah. That's the thing about modern monetary theory that's so wonderful. That's why it's theory. People get wrapped up on that word, but in reality, it's a coherent explanation of how currency works. And in this case, if a government were to implement a crypto-style currency, MMT would then in turn describe how it worked as well.
Yeah. You got a picture?
Yeah. I'll read this picture out.
We have a. Let me do the super chat real quick. You want me to do the super chat?
Yeah.
The super chat says because this is something in where we're at right now. The day drinker said, "Thank you so much for the super chat contribution." He says, "I know the day drinker. The Fed is creating billings daily to prop up banks. They created trillions during the bailout. They do more than rates, right?"
So what they do is they shift debt instruments around. Okay. Ultimately, it's like shifting chairs on the Titanic. They cannot create what we call net financial assets. That right there in and of itself is the sole purpose of the Congress, that's the federal government. So in other words, you can shift the form of debt from type A to type B. It's forms of moneyness, bonds and shifting to various derivatives and so forth. There's all forms of debt instruments out there. A million. If you go look at all the different types of things they sell, I mean, look at The Big Short. I mean, they sell anything, right? So these guys package and repackage and shift debt around. It's not that they, quote unquote, created money out of thin air in the sense of like what you're saying. What they've done is, and this is important, interbanking, what they've done is they've shifted those debts onto one side of the ledger and then wrote them off. So in a way, it's like a tax, quantitative easing, which is really, one of the big things that you're talking about there, the ability of the central banks to change their books, to offload their books and clear debt is very much a part of their role. But it doesn't really impact the federal government's ability to spend on the people at all.
Johnny, you got a picture you said?
Yeah, we're going to show one of the memes that Steve sent. It's, let's see. Okay, it says it's a postcard, and it's a postcard to the political class.
I like this one.
And it says, why MMT? It says, 1, federal taxes do not fund federal spending. In parentheses, it says fiat money system. 2, the U.S. can never run out of money. It's a currency issue. 3, real resources limit federal programs and not money. 4, so no Social Security / Medicare financing problem. 5, so unemployment means the deficit isn't big enough. 6, the jobs guarantee enables democratic control over a living wage.
Amen.
Nice.
So how do you feel, Fiorella? Do you understand what MMT?
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of want to go back into like, how do you answer the question when, say, a Republican goes and says, but Bernie Sanders, you're going to provide Medicare for all, but you're going to raise taxes on the middle class. And and they try to get him to say yes or no. And he is raising taxes, but how would you explain it in the sense of MMT, how that's okay, how it's still gonna work?
So taxes may not fund spending, but taxes are an important part of our economy. And the way we level those taxes directly impacts buying power of each segment of the population. If we tax at the high end where they can really handle it, like AOC said, let's go ahead and freaking go way back machine and go 70%, marginal income tax rate, whatever. But Bernie Bernie is up against a buzzsaw here, right? And this is really difficult because in talking with Stephanie and talking with others, one of the big things is he's got to get elected, and he's got to work with people that don't understand this. And
Exactly.
sadly, they understand taxes. So what Bernie will oftentimes do is feign to the one side and say, okay, well, we'll do this. But in reality, going back to even the 2015, 2016, primary where he ran against the shill, what he did there was he offered up 33 trillion in new spending with only 19 trillion in new taxes. Now that's a huge amount of deficit spending right there, if you think about it. And Hot Air, which was the Republican hit rag that was going around at the time, like Mediaite and all the other ones, was out there mocking him, saying, Bernie doesn't know how to do math. Look at it. He's offering up 33 trillion in new spending, only 19. Well, I got the opportunity, and I wasn't on purpose, but I got the opportunity. I was asked to speak at a rally in D.C., and I went. And all of a sudden, I'm like, man, why? I'm sporting the Real Progressives logo, and I'm all progressive out. And I show up, and there's a lot of red hats around me. I'm like, what in the Sam Hill am I doing? I'm at a friggin' MAGA rally. I'm at a friggin' QAnon gang. I mean, I was like, what in the world is going on here? And I was like, breathe, Grumbine, breathe. And I quickly thought through it, and I said, okay, I'm going to still speak to these people. I'm going to tell them the truth about economics. And so I got up in front of a whole friggin' MAGA gang. They're wondering why this guy with a Real Progressive shirt on is that their thing. And I said point blank, I talked to them about returning veterans, and I talked to them about the VA. And I said, there's absolutely no reason that any veteran should ever go. First of all, we should stop making veterans. I said, but second of all, the veterans that are here, there's no reason they should not be taken care of with grace and blah, blah, blah. And I explained how it worked there. And the light bulbs went on for them because I was talking about things that mattered to them. So when you revert back and you say, listen, I know that you love your kids too. I used to be a Republican. So I'm sitting there saying, hey, look, I get it, man. I used to worry about the debt and deficits too. But here's the deal. You watch Trump just blow the deficit up, and how many of us died from it? None. But yet you still found Democrats trying to drudge up the stuff about deficits. Why? Political theater. And I'm as far left as I can go anymore. And I'm still saying I can relate to Republicans because they're looking for fairness. They don't understand why their hard-earned tax dollar should fund your bad decisions and so on and so forth. And you know what? There's an ounce of understanding there because they're like, I worked really hard for this money, damn it. I don't want it to go to everybody else. I want to take care of my family. It may not be the best thinking, but I get it. You can understand it. And so when you do understand MMT, you can tell them, say, listen, I got good news for you. Bernie Sanders may be raising taxes, but the efficiency from Medicare for all is so efficient, so cheap. So it's like a tax cut. Even though they may raise taxes in some respect, your actual outgo for getting this actually diminishes radically. So in this case, you got to win, man. This is a winner chicken dinner, Mr. Republican. And I think that's how you approach it. And I think as long as you understand where they're coming from, what that starting point is, you can curve that message right into their sweet spot and explain he may be raising taxes right now to accommodate the sensibilities of average voters who don't know any better. But in reality, at the end of the day, Medicare for all is actually deflationary because, number one, it requires far less overhead. So that means far less economic activity. And so it's actually going to depress the economy, ironically, by efficiency. So you got to make up for it somehow, right? And so in my opinion, in Warren Mosler's position and most MMTers' positions, we would say, hey, man, we need to cut taxes to impose Medicare for all because you're actually countering a deflationary event. But Bernie's not dealing with economists. He's dealing with people that get 5-minute sound bites. And you can see how hard I've been talking about MMT since 2015 publicly. Mm-hmm. And for 5 or 6 years prior to that, I've talked to everybody under the sun. I was on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial with many people that you all know, like Nico House and Lee Camp and Tim Canova and all these folks. So it was a real progressive event. Now I'm telling them taxes don't fund federal spending. And they're all, what? Tim Canova's come out. Taxes don't fund federal spending. What? What? And you said this for years and years and years, and people are still not getting it. So at the end of the day, you got to imagine Bernie Sanders is trying to win the presidency, and he's got people that are hearing all kinds of nonsense. How in the heck is he going to win the presidency, impose these huge programs, and at the same time, by the way, teach everyone economics? It's just up to us. It's not me us moment. And I think, unfortunately, we really do have to tell the truth and explain to people, yeah, he's doing something, I don't agree with it, but he's doing it because you don't understand. So let's make you understand so he doesn't have to do it next time. I mean, that's the best answer I got.
So how does the MMT ensure regulatory oversight of Wall Street and markets? That was another question which somebody emailed in earlier this week, knowing that you were going to come on. So
MMT is a description of how currency works, period. So remember, it's not just a U.S. thing. It's Japan and Australia, Russia, all these things.
Yeah.
So it doesn't purport to be a regulatory body. It doesn't purport to be a police station or a hang gliding, recreation center. It is a description of how currency works. And it tells us how we can evaluate a program. You look at Glass-Steagall and things like that. That is how you regulate a bank. And let me tell you, Warren Mosler, who I refer to frequently because he is the father of modern monetary theory, he has some proposals out there for how to reform this stuff. And really, it's what you get down to is regulatory reform. And you're talking about bringing back some teeth and making banking boring again, right? Literally, and this is why the UBI is such a treacherous trap. Because you're talking about Wall Street. Well, the UBI is all about Wall Street. This is about fattening and expanding those balance sheets on those businesses by allowing them to continue to grow, because they can't grow if the salaries are not growing. But by throwing $1,000 chump change at people, now all of a sudden their bottom lines can grow again. And in reality, what we need to be doing is expanding the bottom line of real Americans, everyone, providing everyone an out from Wall Street's grasp and from Silicon Valley's death clutch. If we can do that through a federal job guarantee and turn around and do a modern, Glass-Steagall on steroids, hit the shadow banking, start. But see, here's the problem. You can only regulate so much. There's only, because they're slick. They're always finding new ways to repackage something. And if you ever see the movie The Big Short, there's parts of it that are not exactly perfect. Okay, but I just interviewed Bill Black. I don't know if you all know Bill Black, but he was the guy that prosecuted the Keating Five. For the younger audience out there, the Keating Five happened in the late 80s and 90s, so you probably weren't around for it. But it's an important part of our nation's history because it also came through the savings and loan, the mortgage crisis, and the global financial crisis, which all were three acts of the same massive fraud. And if you look, the answer to our questions for how to regulate come down to, hey, undo what the hell Bill Clinton did, undo what the hell, Bush and Reagan did, and let's get back to figuring out how to make bankers nerds and boring again instead of the guys running around dropping singles at the club. We need to frigging get rid of the excitement factor.
Yeah. The beginning part of that movie, so.
Yes.
I just really quick, I want to just verify so you're saying that under a federal jobs guarantee, we would essentially be able to create our own jobs in a sense of let's say I wanted to be an artist and I found a way to use that for the better of the community, or if I wanted to be an independent journalist, we would have complete ability to create that.
Your local communities,
Right.
It's going to be federally funded, locally administered. So your local community, if I'm putting my Steve Grumbine activist hat on and I go into my local community, I'm going to say, you know what? I know a lot of people that would really like to do real honest to God investigative reporting, and they would like to be able to have that as a job. And I think that we should fund it. And I put it onto the board and the people vote for it. It's going to happen. And you know what? You're going to see different communities have different values. You're going to see Republican communities have very different values than you will in different, progressive communities. And I think that is going to facilitate a shift, because now that the job is guaranteed, people are not trapped in a community that doesn't serve them, that doesn't feel right, that they don't want to be in. They
Right.
can pick up and go. And I think this really increases maximum mobility, maximum freedom, and it provides a safety net like no other. So that's my take on it.
So when it's when the money's distributed locally, how does local taxes work? Because that's different than federal taxes, right?
Yes, it is. I'm glad you said that. So you look at the states, and they are, a lot of them are really broke. They have these bloated pension systems that the federal government should take over immediately. I mean, there's no reason. Look at Puerto Rico. I mean, Puerto Rico, it could have been fixed in 5 seconds. We could have easily fixed that without any problem. Flint, Michigan, immediately could have fixed that.
Right.
There's no reason for any of that, right? So, but the state taxes and the county taxes and the city taxes and the local taxes and the all this stuff, these serve very important purposes, right? Because the states are funding all these services. But the states are currency users. They're not currency issuers. So I would propose, and I think a lot of MMTers would propose, going back to block grants for the states to be able to supplement anything. I mean, there's no reason the federal government can't fully fund education. There's no reason that the federal government cannot fully fund upgrades to the power grid and to the entire infrastructure of a nation. There's no reason to put the weight of a pension plan on a state that has to tax to be able to do that. And if you remember my talk about Texas running, cutting the bottom out to lure business down there. I mean, y'all remember Rick Perry and the gang? Come on down to Texas, blah, blah, blah. And they're out there poaching businesses left and right. Well, you look at areas where the businesses is left, the tax base dries up. There's no funding, there's no services, and then you end up with these third world states, third world countries. I mean, you look at areas of Detroit and you can see it crystal clear as business left, and there's no tax base now. So yes, very, very different things. States, I think there's only one state, and I, for the life of me, can't remember which one it is, but I think every state has a balanced budget amendment. Every state has to balance their books. Every single state either has to raise taxes or get bonds. And I think they all have a heavy bond purchase with the federal government so that they can offset down cycle years so that they have resources to pay for emergencies and so forth. So, going back to what I was saying, I really do believe that the federal government's role in deficit spending on the states is very, very important. And one more quick thing to this. You look at folks in California, you guys are in California, you look at folks up in Washington State, and a lot of people are pushing things like state-based Medicare for all. Now, I want you to think about this for a minute. Maybe California has an economy big enough to support Medicare for all as a state, but the average state in the United States couldn't do this. They don't have the resources, they don't have the money, they don't have the tax base. So what you do is you have a state that does this, and then all of a sudden they have a problem. And then they go belly up and they say, see, Medicare for all was a really bad thing. We shouldn't give it to everybody. Now, all of a sudden, the state screwed it up for everyone because the state's not a currency issuer. The federal government has the unlimited capacity to do each of these things. So when you look at the taxes and you look at the role of the currency issuer versus the state, it's a very, very different paradigm. I hope that answered that question.
We have a super chat contribution from Richard Greenwood. It says, automation is good to help our workforce shore up U.S. infrastructure and fight climate destruction. UBI is wrong because we are not going to run out of work, but we may run out of time. And that is an interesting point because we are in this rut. And I say to Johnny all the time, the reason why we are in the monetary system is that we can have a small amount be really rich to have a huge amount be really poor. And is that correct? Why are we in this rut? And then what should we do moving forward? I mean, if we can print all our dollar and it doesn't need to be homeless, why are we in this situation anyways?
Perfect question, man. I love it. Neoliberalism. Neoliberalism has been a rogue strain of evil. And we're not talking about the pejorative that many people who don't know what neoliberalism is to say, oh, Hillary's a neoliberal. She is a neoliberal. But the reason she's a neoliberal is because she's a privateer. She's one of those people that's trying to strip away the social safety net, the social spending, the social fabric of our nation, push our services to the private sector. The only difference with her and Paul Ryan is that Paul Ryan had an R in front of his name and she has a D in front of hers. At the end of the day, they're all neoliberals. The thing with Paul Ryan is he's also a neocon to go with his neoliberal.
Yeah.
That.
So is Hillary.
What's that?
So is Hillary.
Yep. Well, I know, but I'm trying to make just more of a. I could pick a different person, like a Sherrod Brown, even, right? I mean, you've got different people in this spectrum where Paul Ryan is the Judeo-Christian, the neo-fascist over here, and then you've got over here the neoliberal. And the neoliberal is straight out of Ayn Rand, straight out of Atlas Shrugged, the makers and the takers. Let's go ahead and give you some money, and go out and buy your services from the market. And that, whenever you hear Elizabeth Warren talking about markets, she's a neoliberal. Do you understand me? Elizabeth Warren, you are a neoliberal.
Absolutely.
Okay,
so that's no on Elizabeth Warren, huh?
She's
a solid no.
But she has a plan.
She has a plan, Steve.
She always has a plan to get on new markets, right? Now, I happen to know some of her advisors, and they're really, really good people. And they have tried really hard to work in there and to get things. And she's got some ideas that you want to say, oh, wow, that sounds really good. She's talking about student debt cancellation. Well, no, she's not. Once again, it's neoliberal. She's cutting off some people so that she can say, see, I did this for some people. But in reality, she's still keeping us trapped in this Wall Street market space where we're still in debt to our gills. And folks, I'm telling you right now, I have $128,000 in student debt. I have $200,000+ in mortgage. I have a multitude of other things from healthcare issues. You start looking at that and it's like, gee, many Christmas, I got to be a 1%er just to survive. Okay? And this is what neoliberalism does. And so you ask the question of why the gap. Well, the gap is always there, right? The gap, the whole gap, and nothing but the gap. We're structured in such a way that we have tried to push people to markets. We've literally cut the power of the purse off. And you can see clearly in like 1972, the trajectory of the wage gap, the wealth gap just blew up.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, some people would say, oh, because we left the gold standard. See, there it was. It's all wrong because of the gold standard. But in reality, it's because we thought we were still on the gold standard and we allowed Paul Volcker, Milton Friedman, and the rest of those right-wing nut jobs to sit there and make us believe the nation was broke. In order to stave off inflation, we couldn't print any more money. Printing money will make hyperinflation. And these guys have been proven liars 1,000 times over again, yet people keep repeating it like it's just frickin' manna from heaven. And in reality, it's literally gut rot. It is absolute bullshit in a chef's salad. So in the end, it has always been about the gap, the whole gap, and nothing but the gap between the rich and the poor. How do we measure each other? By who has the most toys. And so this goes back to power. It's really about power. And so what we're claiming with MMT is let's render the friggin' rich irrelevant.
Yeah.
We don't need their money. Let's do it without them. Screw them. And if they want to flee, no problem. We'll replace you with a real person and we'll actually create a better society without you. Now go, get out of here. Get out of the fucking country, you rich people. I don't care. We can do a better society without you. And we don't need your dollars. We're not going to worship you. We can do it with our government.
Did you see the Joker, Steve? You're going crazy over
But
here.
I was hungry for rich people.
Could we eat the rich? Because I can cook. We talk about it all the time.
Man, let's fry them up, man. Let's have a souffle, man. Let's do something.
I want to
with
braise them. Braise them, baby.
Now, real quick, Steve, when I asked your question earlier about the local taxes, you mentioned the balanced budget. So I looked up, in state balanced budget requirements. And it says all the states except Vermont have a legal requirement of a balanced budget.
Yep.
So what does Vermont have instead? And
Bernie Sanders. That's it. He knows MMT. So he don't care about
dropping
the deficit.
MMT gang symbols up in Vermont. Yeah. I think, ultimately they can just simply take out bonds and stuff like that. And ultimately they just don't have that there, but they still operate largely as if they do have one. They have a self-imposed one. But yeah, this is the deal though. And if you think about it, if you're electing officials and you know that a state government has to balance its budget, you're going to look for a fiscally conservative person to run the state because they've got to balance the budget. Or maybe you try and find someone super liberal, but then how are they going to do it? Because now you got to raise taxes, and then you've got all that gamesmanship that goes on with that at the local level. I believe in the 99%. I believe that even though there's a lot of bad people in this world, there's a lot of good people in this world, and they're not all on one side of the aisle. And when you start thinking about people as people, and you start realizing that we're stronger together, you start trying to find ways of saying things that bring them together and start showing that we can all have nice things. And so I think that when you approach this from an MMT lens and explain to them, hey, Republicans, trust me when I say this, we don't need your hard-earned tax dollars to pay for, so-and-so's bad decision. And hey, so-and-so's over there, we don't have to reduce the deficit, because at the end of the day, the real issue is we've got to go ahead and bring about some real meaningful substantive change in the policy space. And so Democrats always fail. Look at Nancy Pelosi and her pay-go-see. I mean, this is the epitome of neoliberal. Hey, we're too broke. Oh my God, we got to raise taxes to pay for stuff, Hillary Clinton style. And I want you to know something. Once you understand what I'm saying and you see people saying it, it's really, really hard. It's really hard because when you start realizing that the lack of spending is literally killing people.
Yeah.
The poor are living under bridges. They are putting spikes on the damn benches so they can't lay on them. They're putting spikes on the walls. They're literally people are billy clubbed in New York City. This homeless that were sleeping. Some dude ran around just clubbing them on the head. And they have no protection, no nothing. I mean, this is not even inhumane. This is like, I can't even begin to tell you how ashamed I am of our nation for allowing that. And then you think to yourself, reducing the deficit. Well, what does that do? That reduces spending. That pulls money out of the economy. That leaves the poor more vulnerable once again. And then you start saying, who's the ones asking to reduce the deficit? Who's the ones asking to raise taxes? Do you realize what you're doing is literally killing someone? It's not benign. It's not just my bad. You're killing someone by cutting into the spending. And it's in that moment that light bulb hits, that you realize how vital and how important MMT is. And you realize, while the crazy people like myself who went full Joker for a minute, you realize why we're so passionate about this subject, because it's not just like some nerdy thing. It literally has lives at the end of it.
Yeah.
And that right there is the aha moment I hope everybody has after this.
Super chat contribution from Philip Blair. Thank you so much. He said Medicare for All started in Saskatchewan. No?
Started where?
I don't know.
Saskatchewan.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't know why he thought, Steve would know.
I don't know that. That's my sound engineer for my podcast that I do called Macro and Cheese, which you can learn about all this stuff we're talking about now. He's in Canada, so I'll ask him.
And then Proof Anthrax says populationmatters.org. You know about that?
Population matters. No, I don't know about that. I imagine it's something to do with reducing the population or something to that effect, population control. But no, I'm not familiar with it.
If it's all about resources at the end of the day, shouldn't we be conscious of it? I don't know if we have to really strike it down, but shouldn't we be conscious of that?
Well, so let's talk about that for a minute, right? If you look in the cities, how many rooftops do we have that could have solar panels put on them right now? If you look, how many things are run down warehouses that are left completely in ill repair that could be turned into farms, internal farms, and like layer upon layer of aquaponic, hydroponic gardens, period. I mean, there's so much. It's hard to take that seriously because we're doing things terribly inefficiently right now. So a lot of what we're seeing is a direct result of greed and incompetence, literally making us look very different than we really are. I mean, in fairness, we have huge swaths of land that are completely and utterly uninhabited. We're not dealing in a situation where we're like stacked on each other. That's the cities. But in reality, we just do things very poorly. We literally do things very poorly because there's a profit motive tied to them that a UBI, by the way, would facilitate even more, unfortunately. So if you think about this, if you look at the possibility of doing things paid for by the government where profit is not the motive, but doing right by humanity is, and doing right by our planet is, we have a whole different story to talk about. Story we have today, I mean, God, we're a scourge on the earth as humanity because we're so stupid. We do things so inefficiently, we're burning ourselves up. If we change things, if we do things differently, and I think that's what the framework for a Green New Deal allows for, all of a sudden we're talking about something very, very different. And so when we look at real resources and population, well, what are real resources? If we can make food in layers of aquaponic gardens in old rundown warehouses, as opposed to, having to do all this cow farts and everything else throughout the heartland, if we can do things differently, more efficiently, why wouldn't we? Aquaponic gardens. I mean, you think about this. There's zero waste. It's amazing. There's so much that we can do that we're not doing. We really need to look hard before we worry about resources, in my opinion.
I agree. And not to mention that at least here in LA, we have very many apartments that are condos that are very, very like luxury apartments, and they're completely empty. And yet we have so many people out on the sidewalks in the streets. Because why? Because they're not building affordable housing, because these investors come in and they're like, oh, we're going to pay you this much instead of, having you build bridge housing, or having you build like tiny homes, or having you build other things that would benefit everybody else. So it's obviously a misuse of resources. It's obviously greed, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
Just as far as ooh, I think I lost my train of thought. I think I was gonna ask about how we I lost my train of thought.
Can I just say something about the housing situation that you raised? Because this is really important. I don't want to get past this. Bernie Sanders has talked about making housing a right. I want you to know that out here in Pennsylvania, where I am, we have more empty malls than you will ever shake a stick at. They're boarded up. They're just sitting there, eyesores. How easy would it be to turn malls into housing for the poor? How great would it be to create good quality, low-cost housing for people? I mean, we could even make it free. We could make it true public housing and really make it nice instead of making people live in squalor and say, be grateful. There's no reason for us to shove that crap down. We can make nice things. And in my opinion, what you said is absolutely true. You look in New York City, and housing is at such a premium. People are buying these houses up like crazy, and then they're squatting on them. And then the poor can't live there, so they have to move way the hell out of the city. And they're talking about 2-3 hour commutes just to do their day job. It's ridiculous. It's bad for the environment, and it's a terrible scourge on regular humanity. Regular people can't live there, and that's how they push the regular people out of these places. And you look what's happened in San Francisco. Yeah. It's aberrant. It's the same shit, it's different terrible. Day. Yeah. So I'm with you.
Cannabis Sativa with a super chat contribution says, does every state with ballot measures need to get rid of a balanced budget amendment to get through a Bernie Sanders type of agenda?
No. In fact, states themselves are really not the ones that would pay for a federal program. States, they choose their own programs. The federal government is the currency issuer. It would spend that money into the states directly. And think about this right now. I'm going to use a cocaine example just for fun for the young kids out there.
We love these.
So the coke guy, the dude that goes out there and puts it all together, he's got 100% pure. And he's sitting there in his bag. He's like, yeah, right. Now all of a sudden he sells to the first guy. Well, the first guy goes, yeah, and he takes some cut and waters it down. Now from 100%, now it's down to 75%. And then he sells to his homies. The next guy takes it, says, yeah, okay, cuts it back down to 50%. Yeah. And then we get down to the poor guy in the street, and he's got 25% pure, right? And this is what happens with the U.S. government when it spends $1. It spends $1 at Halliburton. It spends $1 at every one of these military industrial complex megacorps, these huge global nationals. It spends it there first. And then we pray to God, oh, dear God, but please, Halliburton, will you please trickle your urine on me so I have $1 to spend? And that right there is the wrong answer. That's the privilege. So when we look at the states, the thing about the job guarantee, it directly infuses it at the bottom. Money automatically has a helium effect because it goes to the top. It's going to pool where the wealth is. So if you start at the top, you're praying to God the rich are nice enough to spend their money on you. But if you spend it at the bottom, the people have to buy loaves of bread, milk, whatever it is they do. This right here is the answer to your question about Bernie Sanders. The federal government will spend that money as opposed to the states having to do it. And that's a real big deal. That's a huge deal.
And I just remembered what I was going to ask. How do you frame it when, people are like, well, I don't want, especially the libertarians and Republicans, like, well, I don't want the government in control.
Yeah,
like by doing this, yes, having a federal jobs guarantee, the argument that a lot of people were saying against it is like, well, I don't want the government involved and enforcing me to have a certain job. How would you explain that to them?
Well, so first of all, you're going to be forced by somebody. It's either going to be a corporation looking to make profit on your scalp, or it's going to be we the people running our government. And that's the choice. And that's why the federal job guarantee is so important, because we're talking about local people doing local things for their local community. And, I could run for mayor tomorrow in my tiny little town, and maybe I'd win. I doubt it. I don't have enough chops to be out here in deer hunting country. I'm not that guy, so I'm probably not going to get elected. But for somebody that wants to run for their local area, which I recommend, which Bernie recommends, and I think the whole gang recommends, we should all be running for office if we can. But these local communities right here are where the action is going to be in that case. We have to mass mobilize. I want you to think about this. The climate crisis is so severe. We've waited so long that it's not going to, we're like in that calm before tsunami, the water pulls back and you're picking up conch shells and, oh, look at this. You don't even see the wall of water coming your way. We have got to mobilize America in such a way that it's not going to matter whether or not you want small government or big government or any government. At the end of the day, we're in a fight for survival. And that may sound alarmist to people that don't believe in climate change, but all you have to do is look at areas like down in Florida where Tim Canova is, and you can see the impacts of climate change already. And then let me tell you an offshoot of this that maybe doesn't seem quite direct. Look at the refugees in these third world countries where there's war that has been brought on by the U.S. government in some cases, in other cases brought on by famine and other things, a fight for real resources, like somewhat like Syria, where the productive capacity they were a food secure nation. They were a self-producer. And all of a sudden they got rocked with drought and the people started moving into the cities. Now all of a sudden, what do you got? You've got people on top of each other and scarce resources. Now the hatred really kicks in. Look in the United States. Look at all the crazy nonsense with Trump and wanting to get rid of immigrants, etc. This is a direct result of artificial scarcity. So when you think about Republicans and you think about all these problems and the fights we're having, that's why I don't get into all the back and forth about whether an immigrant is good or bad or this or that. At the end of the day, the reason these people are complaining about it at all is because they think immigrants are taking their jobs, because they think immigrants are taking their women, because they think immigrants are doing this, that, and the other. And in the end, they're very scared. And they're scared because we have put the brakes on public spending, which has eliminated work. So everybody is fighting each other, tearing each other apart, trying to get a nickel. And reality is it's a complete shit show that we live in right now. And it's no wonder we see violence. It's no wonder we see pain and suffering and suicides up like crazy. It's no wonder. And let me tell you one more thing I want to bring up about the job guarantee. Right now, our employer of last resort is the military. Think about that for a minute. Yeah. What does a job guarantee do? You all you peaceniks out there, you people that love to be anti-war, all together now, I'm with you. But the antidote there is to take the teeth out of the war machine and get a job guarantee and let kids have a choice between doing something in their local communities versus picking up an M16. That's my take on it.
Absolutely. 100%.
That's awesome.
So then the solution to the fucked up United States of America that we have right now is to get someone in the office that understands MMT, understands that it's basically just redirecting our resources into a specific direction, but also more importantly, the Congress we need to change. Correct?
Absolutely. I'm going to give you another take on this, a new take, a slightly different take that we all actually, I know, agree on. The people united can never be defeated. And if we, the people, we, the progressive movement, take on the larger movement and we say, we know what you're doing. We understand how you're like lying to us. You're gaslighting us into believing we can't do nice things. And all of a sudden, we, the people, demand these things. Richard Nixon was not an environmentalist. But guess what Richard Nixon passed into law? The Environmental Protection Agency. So when the people united demand, it doesn't matter if we've got a Republican Congress. The one thing they don't want is people smart and ready to fight. And you know what? They've already got us desperate. So there's plenty there for us to rally around and unite around. It would be great under normal circumstances, and I'm still fighting for this, to change Congress. Yeah. I'm still fighting to get a good president. I'm still fighting for all those things. But in the meantime, I'm doing hand-to-hand combat one-on-one with activists and other media people. And I'm going to be honest with you. I attack our own progressive media, not because I don't love them. I love everyone. But I want them to take notice of this. And I want to commend both you, Craig, and you, Fiorella, for having the show. And you, sir, Mr. Man behind the plan here.
Jonny Tsunami.
I want to thank all of you. Jonny Tsunami, you are all great. This is wonderful. And I want to thank you for giving us a shot to talk about this, because it is so vital to every one of your listeners. And look, I'm telling you right now, if you don't hear anything else, I was once a Ron Paul guy. I was all about the end the Fed stuff. I was into all this conspiracy stuff. And I'm here to tell you that it was a distraction, like a shiny object in the desert, man. It was a mirage. It led to nowhere. It just sidelined me, took me out of commission. I'm on a mission, and it's straightforward. And that is to get us to where we embrace the power of public money, to where we embrace the power of the public purpose, and that we fight like mad for each other to have a better life. And that, to me, is what makes MMT so powerful, because it is literally the weapon that I use to go to war.
10. That's what you taught me, 10. We need to find the 10 richest elites that are controlling this monetary system and have ourselves a barbecue, braised, eat these son of a bitches, get everybody in line so that there will be no more homeless, there will be no more wars, and we can start doing what you said, producing food properly, and people living with a great life that they can be proud and hold their head up high and help out society.
Let's get everybody on board, man. Let's get everybody embracing this and understanding it, and hold even our heroes accountable. I mean, I love Bernie, but I attack Bernie too. I mean, I don't attack him. I say point blank, dude. I go to Ro Khanna, dude. I go to Tulsi. What's up? I do all of them. I mean, it's at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Lee Camp, Lee, hello. Nico, hello. Tim Black, hello. And I'll do it because I love y'all and I want to win. I want to survive. I want to do good things. And this is that vital. And I get it. It's hard. So we've got to work together to bring about awareness, because this is that big a deal.
A super chat contribution from Crystal Folk says, Steve is great at getting people to the aha movement. MMT is the key to the progressive movement. Bring on Fidel Kebab and Stephanie Kelton too as well, please. So I think those are some of your colleagues. We've getting a big cry for Stephanie Kelton. So if you can lead her the way to us, we want to continue to have this conversation.
Yes.
Absolutely. Fidel Kebab and I were in, or Fadel Kebab is his real name. He was at our Green New Deal, our Path Forward, which was in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, last weekend. And he came 7 hours from Ohio, drove out there from 2:15 in the morning to get out there to speak to a small crowd. We didn't have a huge crowd. I wish we'd have had a much larger crowd. But the crowd that we did have was very engaged and really had a lot of aha moments. And I'm hoping that we can get people like Fadel Kebab up there. Stephanie has got her hands full in a lot of things. She's a tough one to catch.
Gotcha.
So I wouldn't take it too hard if you can't get her. But there are plenty of other people in this movement. And I mean, really, really good people that are available and able to answer these questions. And I would just commend you all for reaching out to me, because as an activist, my Real Progressives is now a 501c3 pending. We also have a 501c4 pending called Real Progress in Action. And we have a podcast called Macro and Cheese. You put it all together, and our focus is literally about trying to change the world and help people understand this stuff. But we're at the activist level. We're trying to take this really important information that these academics and these experts are doing and boil it down for regular Joes like you and I. But people like Fadl Kaboub are just an amazing resource. And he tells this story so calmly, so smoothly. He would be the greatest guest you've ever had on.
Awesome.
I think we'll look at him.
Yeah.
Anything else before I read the last super chat? Big Baby Bazuba said, when Jimmy Dore talked about MMT, did you like it? I did like it, and I liked Stephanie, and I loved you. And I just want to say thank you for coming on to the show today. This was awesome. I think we should do it again,
Absolutely.
Professor Steve.
Anytime.
So let's we'll get you on the books. We'll do it again. And where can people find you? Where can they find the Real Progressives?
So Real Progressives is on Facebook. We're on YouTube. We're on Twitter. We have Macro and Cheese, which is our podcast. It's at www.macro cheese.com. You can find us on Stitcher and Apple and all the other podcast channels. And then, when I say literally just, we literally just launched our 501c4 Real Progress and Action. That will be to impact the political side and to really, really take activism to the streets, building home groups, stuff. So we're looking at really expanding our footprint more so in the real world and away from some social media. We're doing both, but the idea here is that we're now doing the streets. So there's a lot of good work coming.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate you. That was very eye-opening. It's a lot. It's difficult to change your mindset, like the way you were initially thinking and the way you've been taught and the way you are dismissed when you question trickle-down economics, when you question this theory that so many, arrogant economists think they know, and, they dismiss you. And it's we're going to have to do a lot of work to change people's mentality, because it's not necessarily something that is innate in people.
I want to tell you one thing real quick to that, and I know we're trying to sign off, but this is so important. The heterodox, meaning outside the orthodoxy economists like Stephanie Kelton, these people are being denied access to academic journals. They're being denied access to things that regular people would find, like jerk Paul Krugman and people like Larry Summers and other idiots like this that have literally been the architects of our demise.
Yeah.
They have blocked Stephanie and the gang and Randall Ray and Pavlina Cherneva and the rest of Bill Mitchell in Australia and Stephen Hale. And they talk about being blacklisted in academia and literally checked out of professions for daring to speak heresy outside of the catechism of the orthodoxy. And this is a really, really big deal, because we've had to do it through alternative means, which is what we do here with you all. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so mumuch, Steve.
Yeah, I think we're going to have a party with Saunders. We're going to braise his ass. Thank you so much for joining, ladies and gentlemen. That was Steve Grumbine. I'll let Professor Steve when he comes over here from the Real Progressive. We want to thank you for joining in. Remember, we have a Patreon if you can help on out. Also, we have a Twitch, a Twitter, Rockfin, ROKFIN, our YouTube, and our Facebook. For Pasta Jardula,
Fiorella Isabel,
and Jonny Tsunami.
CONVO out.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.
Have a good one.